Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And as usual, it is my honor. And I really do take this serious when the guest comes to my space, because I know they're coming and offering several things that are very precious to them. First, their time. I know that time is such a precious commodity, and that they are willing to come and share that with us, and also their journey. That is a personal journey. It is powerful. It houses much, and they are here to trust us with this information. And I, with my heart, I want to create a space by which that individual can feel free to share. And I want to welcome Michelle to us, for I am excited to have this human spirit before us so that we can learn together to become better human spirits. Michelle, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, Ken.
It is my honor. Michelle, tell them about your creations, because I've been looking at your pages and all the different things, the authors, and we're going to get to dance about all of that information. But I want you to tell them what you have created so far.
Sure. I have created, my so far masterpiece is the book that I wrote last year, and it's called Hold Space, Affirmations and Meditations for Healing and Loving Yourself. That is one of my greatest creations that had been brewing for years and years. I have created a space. Not only is the book called Hold Space, but a healing space for people in my Reiki practice, for particularly helping people with trauma, because I had, for some reason, been gifted the access to the Akashic Records in this life. And so by combining Reiki energy healing with Akashic Records, I'm able to help people go to their way back where trauma happened, whether it's this life or another life. I have created a space for people to learn about themselves if they consider themselves light workers or star seeds, and lots of kind of mini courses to develop that and learn more about themselves, or learn more about accessing different modalities of energy healing. So that would be the main stuff. I also teach yoga, and my specialty always was mommy, baby, and prenatal yoga, which is helping women create the mother that they want to be.
That is some powerful stuff that you laid out there. I love your life collective work is about the self and being present with the self. And so I'm excited about that. I want to go back, Michelle, because you started young, and that fascinates me. So I want you to talk to me about your upbringing as to your family situation, and how were you in the first lab, I call it too, Michelle. Our family home is the first lab that these scientists are explaining their thesis to us, and we are being, they're just grabbing and taking all of that information in, because it is at that space that we form our perception of the world. Talk to me about your family life.
So I am one of three sisters, the middle child. So, and parents, had their own dysfunctional families. I mean, what is it? 90% of us have come from dysfunctional families. So I grew up in a home with some conflict. My parents were teenagers when they started their family. And so there's a lot of tension, a lot of like thrown in the deep end learning how to be an adult. So there was a lot of, they had a lot of shame. My dad was an alcoholic when I was really young. He's been recovering for many years, but I kind of came out as this very free spirit. I think most children do. But I was taught very young to kind of fit the mold, do the right thing, be the good girl, all that kind of stuff. And, spent most of my adult life fighting back out of that. But I was always kind of an odd kid. I think that there's a certain uniqueness that continued of my soul that continued throughout my life, no matter what. I was a creator as a little kid.
Yeah.
Anytime I was anywhere, it was like, find a piece of paper. Can anybody have a pencil, crayon, drawing, writing from about age 8. First ghost I saw at age 8 also. And that was one area that my family did not bring shame on that. Like, my mother believed that you could see ghosts and that her family line had some gifts. So that wonderful gift was not squashed out of me in my childhood, although it scared me. But it was something that kind of threaded through my years.
Yeah. How, as a young woman and a young girl at the age of 8, and having these visitations and all of those different things that happen, how did that girl, being so young, what were your perception of the outside, meaning the siblings, the friends? Because with that information, you got some security within your mom. But if you mention that information outside of the family, or even inside the family, where you can get traumatized from there, how did you survive? How did you live? Because that is something that I'm very curious about, coming from you at such a young age.
So I don't think I shared it with friends. I know in my grandparents' house, both me and my older sister believed that there were ghosts upstairs. And you could not convince us that there weren't. Even though we didn't see them, it felt like something. And my grandfather used to joke and say, what do they look like? Are they pretty? Do they want to date me? Like, he would always make these kind of silly jokes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would go upstairs. They only had one bathroom upstairs. So we would go upstairs together and wait for each other outside the door, because, keep the coast clear. So it was a little scary with that. It didn't really get squashed out of me. I also had imaginary friends from a young age, which it took into my adult life to realize they were probably messengers of some sort. I don't want to say ghosts, because they didn't appear that way and didn't feel that way, but they were something.
Yeah. I love your classification of yourself when we are young, because a lot of people that I've interviewed, when they're young, people always say they're a little odd. And I love that that classification that we find ourselves in, because most of the people, it's really fascinating, that I've interviewed have been classified as that when they were young, and they were sensitive to spiritual aspect of our existence, whereas most people are that sensitivity has been dampened for whatever reason, whether it's something from previous life or whatever that reason is. When they enter into the space, it seems dampened to the point where it doesn't even exist. So here you are, you're moving through, you have a cohort in your sister about the existence of entities other than yourself. And you guys are growing up, moving out. How did you manage high school? Because I would not mention anything like that in high school. Talk to me about your high school, Michelle. How did you survive it? Because those are some rough times as kids.
They are rough times. So I actually was a pretty sickly kid. I had really bad asthma when I was little, and it just progressively got worse in adolescence, which is something that can happen to a lot of us. So in middle school, I was kind of in and out of school a lot. My lung collapsed. We tried to move to Arizona for a little bit, because the doctor said maybe she'll dry out and be healthy there. And that didn't happen. My asthma followed. So when I got to high school, the same kind of thing was happening. And basically the administration had to talk with my parents and said she can't go in and out, so she can have homeschooling, and the district would cover it. But it's like, you have to commit, you're staying out of school. Yeah. So I was homeschooled for high school, which was strange, because I was already a weird kind of kid and isolated myself when I was younger. But then high school was like super isolated. But, I had a lot of time on my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I would write, create, care for the animals in our house, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Taught myself to cook because from an early age, I wanted to be vegetarian once I found out how meat happened.
Yeah.
And when I got my license, I drove to the library because my mother, my grandmother, every generation said I would die if I was a vegetarian. So I got books and cookbooks and had to, debate my mother of how I could survive. And I had to start cooking for myself because she would not support it. So I was a busy teenager.
That's good. It shows, number one, initiative and tenacity. Some of the crown pleasures of that is necessary in self-development. Those are some of the key things that you must have in order to go on that journey, because a lot of people will say all kinds of fun things about you as you begin to start moving through your journey, trying to adapt, as I said earlier, your own policies and procedures by which you are now going to operate in this planet that we live in. So here you are, how did that, let me ask you this one, how did that form this girl, having the introduction to being sick all the time and being by yourself? We understand that you are learning a few things, taking care of the animal, and I think those are beautiful pieces because it tends to train you to a certain way in mindset. So here you are. How did that type of lifestyle, Michelle, talk to me? How did that make this young woman feel about herself being there and not able to connect in the sense where you're touching and feeling all of the other students and people that are in school?
I was definitely in some dark times from time to time during those years. It was isolating. People that knew me, because when people don't know what happened or don't ask what happened, they make up stories. So I would, find out from friends that people were saying this or that about me. There are some crazy stories that they fathomed, but so it was definitely rough. I think I kept my sanity, my creativity, which really is the saving grace. And it also, all these things gave me a place of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line, I read or heard that children who have chronic diseases grow up really fast because they're exposed to aspects of the world that most kids never see. So being in and out of emergency rooms, being around people who are sick, terminally dying, coming down from a big high or something like that in an emergency room and being combative. I really saw a lot of things in my youth, and I think all of it helped me develop into who I am as a healer, as a creator, as an empathic person.
Yeah, I think everything that we are exposed to in this life, everything, I mean, every single thing, every relationship, every encounter, everything contributes to our growth, our knowledge, our information, everything. And people tend to stand there and say, I'm not contributing anything. But you are. I think you're contributing to your personal development, not knowing. But later on in life, you'll see that much of those things that you were going through as a young person were able to assist you through, number one, managing the pain and all of the different things that were happening to you. And then as you get older, you'll see you don't need some of that anymore. Those are the things that will be interrupting your personal development. But everything that we do, Michelle, I don't think we do anything just doing it because, again, as I mentioned on the onset, we are spirits having this human experience. And so it is really a powerful steps and that we take. I'm telling you, it's happened in my life. Every stupid job that I ever did, every stupid thing that came, I used the knowledge, the principles out of it, and it's just the way things are. So here you are. You mentioned you've been in this dark place, because I wanted to get some insight into that, because what were the thoughts that you were rehearsing within that space? Because those thoughts develop into some, we give them permission to become monsters. What were some of those thoughts that you were playing over and over within your mind, Michelle, as you were this young woman there? Because you said dark places. Those dark places are only brought about by the thoughts that we create. What were some of those that you were creating as a young woman in that space?
So, I mean, it is the space that you're taking up. So I felt like for a lot of my childhood, I was taking up space, being a burden to others. And why was I here?
Yeah.
So yeah, there was some suicidal ideation that came and went through the years. And then there was a really strong drive to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And do better, get out of this, which I did. But I went down to the depth.
How old were you, Michelle, when you made that agreement with yourself that I am going to get it? And I tell people, I believe, Michelle, life is a series of agreements that we make, and I call them a statement of faith. And the reason why I call them that is that you, the individual, have to believe it more than anything else. And once you believe it, it is amazing the steps that you will take to make it to accomplish it. A lot of us say, I'll lose weight or whatever, but we don't really truly believe that. If you do, you will see what that person will do. It will be a continual thing. It's not going to be 2 weeks and then they quit. Where were you? And what were the circumstances? I know you're sickly, but there's always a series of things. And then it crescendos into something and you say, okay, and you make this agreement. What was happening when you made that agreement? Because you mentioned you had the thoughts of suicide, but then you made this agreement note to get better. How did that come about?
Mm-hmm. So there were a couple of agreements, a couple of kind of key moments.
Yeah.
When I was 14, I got my first dog. It was supposed to replace like a family dog and then attached to me. And I also was somewhat of a mother figure to my younger sister, who is 4.5 years younger. And I was committed to stick around for them for a while. And at age 19, so then I ended up going to college, and was able to go to classes, getting healthier, stronger, all that stuff. And then at 19, I had a very big trauma, which sent me back into a spiral of depression and considering, offing myself. And because of that trauma, my friends took me to psych services in college and said, you need help. Mm-hmm. And that is the final age of me saying, nope, I'm going to get over this and I'm going to be strong. Got like the Beyonce, like stronger, better. I'm a survivor. And that's when it happened that I was like, okay, I am not going to let that situation end me.
So now here you are, you were, this trauma caused you to reevaluate your life and wanted to take yourself out, as you say. I almost started laughing when you said that. And you had this experience. Tell me now, what were the steps that once you made that agreement, what were the steps that you took to move you from that space out of that and got you into a more healthy aspect of looking at yourself? What steps did you initiate? I told you this was going to be fun.
So I know. I actually have to take a few steps back.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I feel like as souls that are bigger and wiser than our bodies and our human brains. I feel like they were little breadcrumbs along the way,
Always.
kind of preparing me for certain things.
Always.
I hate to say that, my sexual assault was like predestined, but I think that so many women are. I think that my guidance was to let me know early on. So 8th grade, we had to read the newspaper and do current events. And at the time, it was oh gosh, I can't believe I can't remember his name, but the preppy rapist, I can't remember. But there was this thing. It's the 80s, so I'm aging myself, I'm dating myself. But I read this whole case and how the victim blaming happened and how all this stuff, and this guy was totally guilty. And anyway, so I had a sense before it happened that this was not my fault. And so that, thank God that was taught to me early, because people that I told, I don't believe you. What did you do? How did this happen? Were you, all the questions, were you drinking? What were you wearing? All that stuff. And including my own mother had some judgment. And I just was like, I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to accept that blame. And went through psych services therapy, got more help at a crisis center, and just a lot of support to the point of when I was assigned to a therapist at a clinic, because my parents, like everybody in my family, started to go to therapy for a minute, and I'm the only one that stuck. But I had a therapist who was also judging me, and I literally stood up and I said, no, you don't do that. You should not be working with people who have trauma, and maybe you shouldn't even be a therapist. And she pursed her lips and like clenched her body, and I walked out.
Wow.
But I was really glad. I was like, I've done too much work to let you do this to me.
Yeah.
So that fight is what got me to that point of like, no, I'm going to survive. I'm going to win this round. And yeah, that's it. I just agreed to it.
That is awesome. Seeking the help and seeking guidance is important in the process of moving forward. And it's a shame but that's how this society, I remember I mentioned to you, there are several entities that program us. And society as a whole always program the victim as if it's their fault. And so that programming is so detrimental to the human spirit, especially to women and people that are brutalized in the fashion that you mentioned. And it is a sick mentality. And it's very, seldom that someone will come in there with true empathy and listen to the victims. But that is just a part of the programming, as I mentioned, from the society aspect. And we see that programming, how damaging it is. And you had a chance to experience that type of programming, and you resisted it. You did not bow to it. And because you did not bow, you were able to move through it. Think of all those women that have been broken there. And Michelle, do me a favor. Let's stop right here for a split second and encourage those women that are there in that space where everyone is coming to them and saying, it's your fault. It's your fault. Talk to them and tell them, no, it's not your fault. And with the knowledge that you have today, speak to them to encourage those that are listening maybe in that space.
Thank you. I appreciate that this time. My husband and I were very honest with our kids. I have not told in detail. It was always age appropriate along the way, but my kids are teenagers now, and I have armed them with this tidbit of truth, in fact, and I hope that this helps anyone out there. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, what you drank, who you're with, where you are, how sexy you might look, how alone you might be. No one ever has the right to take your person from you. Nobody ever has the right to do that. It is never your fault, because it really doesn't matter what you're wearing, what you're doing. It's about respect of the body temple, respect of the personhood. And if someone takes from you and your personhood in that way, it was never your fault. It's a flaw, a fault, an anger, a rage, or whatever is driving them, their trauma. And again, that's not your problem either and not your fault. It is never your fault.
Thank you so much, because a lot of people are here and they're in dark spaces, and someone that has experienced that, when you spoke about it, because if I speak about it, it doesn't carry the that energy that will come from your being, because your being had experienced it. So when you speak to it, you will carry much power as they're listening to us. And so thank you for spending some time there. Here you are, you've gone through that, and you're moving through, you're seeking help, getting all kinds of help, as you mentioned. I wanted you to talk to us about when you started reconnecting with your gifts, per se, as to the spiritual aspect of the of this human experience. Now, how did you begin to starting to reconnect with that? Talk to us about that journey and how you what was the incident that caused it to begin, and talk to us a little bit.
So I would have to say it started with yoga. So when actually it happened before that. I had a dream that brought my husband and I together. And so that was part of it. So I always had a little bit of connection to the spirit, no matter what. But when I got into the deep end of the pool with it was when we got engaged. We joined a gym and went to a yoga class, and that was it for me. With the yoga class, it was a full yoga class. He was in one side, I was on another, and at the end he came up to me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I'm home." Mm-hmm. And that just popped out of my mouth. And I was like, I reflected on it. I was like, yeah, this feels like home. So our teacher was trained in an ashram. So she brought in a lot of philosophy. She brought in a lot of the, the sacred texts, the chakras, the niyamas, everything that we could learn from. And it just resonated really strongly with me. And after a class one day, we're like putting on our shoes and stuff, and we're talking, and she just turns to me with this like cold, stern voice and says, "You should become a yoga teacher, Michelle." And I was like, "What?" And I didn't feel that I was ready. I was experienced, whatever. But my husband's like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it together." So we signed up together. Mm-hmm. He had no intention of being a teacher, but he did want to go deeper into his yoga practice. And we had to go. It was a very busy time for yoga teaching and training. So we ended up on a wait list for the following year. And by that time I was pregnant with our daughter. And so I had to go to the instructors and beg to let me to join, because it wasn't a prenatal training. Yeah. But we did. And I said, "Look, I'll do it as long as I can. And if I have to finish the next round, then I will." But we went the whole time, and that was a super spiritual experience, teacher training, because you really go deep into the philosophy and meditation, and the guidance is just incredible. And being pregnant at that time, I felt the spirit of our daughter early on. I felt like I got to know her the whole time she was in the womb, and I was not surprised when she was born. Like, she was just, I felt who she was. Like, she shared that with me, and it was really beautiful. And that was my first Reiki experience. One of the other yoga teacher trainers was training in Reiki, and she said, "I would like to gift you a session." And so we did it. And she, when she worked on my belly while I was pregnant, she said that, I felt it. My body went on fire. She was like, "Oh, your daughter was like, radiating, and her heart opened, and like all this heat." And then she said, "At my hands," she said, "You have healer hands." And I said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "You are a healer, and you could do this." And I said, "Okay, can you teach me?" And she said, "I'm not there yet." So it went on the back burner until I was pregnant with our second child, and we got the diagnosis that my husband had cancer. So our yoga teacher recommended a Reiki practitioner, a very wonderful Reiki practitioner who ended up becoming my Reiki master because his tumor was shrinking before he even started chemo. And that is not like you're going to go to Reiki and it's going to cure your tumor, but it was the sign that I needed to know that this was real and that I needed to do that. Like that was my sign. And it also was a really important experience for him because she said, no, you can do this, but you need to go to chemo too.
Yeah, it is. You have to, the Reiki aspect of it. I know a lot of people that have gotten healed from that, from Reiki and so forth, and the purpose of that. And I tell people we are energy. And one of the principles, because I grew up in Christianity, one of the principles of transferring power or energy is laying on hands. And so I don't understand why people lose their minds over these things, and especially people from the Christian space. So it really doesn't make any sense. But anyway, here you are experiencing, because I wanted to see when did you make that transition. And yoga is a great tool to usher you into that. Because I also was at our ashram, spent some time there, and I learned about meditation and all that. But I was meditating many years before that. And meditation for me, Michelle, was that the key that unlocked much of the spiritual realm to me, as far as where I became the master of my thoughts. And when I became the masters of my thoughts, my world changed, because now I was not living haphazardly. I was living by choice, and it changed. So talk to me here, because I want to linger here a little, Michelle, because you got traumatized and you were damaged in much ways. And of course, when they came and they were programming you, and it was your fault, you resisted that. You had to go on a journey about self, young lady, because you cannot go through all of that stuff and not have to dig a little deeper and investigate yourself and come to the place of peace. Talk to me about that journey. I know you're married and the kids are coming, but you still have you're all individuals. I mean, you got to go on this journey individually, like your husband had to go on his once he got his diagnosis.
Yeah.
And dig from his part of living. So talk to me about that space, Michelle, about now learning about you, falling in love with you, accepting you, learning to love you, learning to forgive yourself, learning to not judge yourself, all the stuff that you are now going to, because you've done it to yourself, you can now give this and offer this to other people. Talk to me about that space.
Okay, sure. It wasn't overnight. Like I said, I went to therapy for probably about 7 years during that time to really find peace with myself. And the beautiful, fringe benefit of that was digging deep into my family programming and trauma and dysfunction and helping me heal that. So it took years of bad relationships, kind of attracting bad relationships because I wasn't quite there yet. Mm-hmm. Almost taking a pride in that I could, pick the worst. Looking back on it, I think, go ahead.
You were practicing, girl. You were practicing when you're shooting, when you're shooting an arrow, you make some nice choices. You're pointing straight, but you shoot all over the place, and then one day it just happens, and you some of us just dream about it. You.
I think also I recently heard this thing about someone said, if you date with the intention of finding your spouse, you're going to miss out on all the experiences you can learn along the way and all the fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's an important thing. Like, most people don't marry their high school sweetheart. Yes, some people do. But most of us have to go through relationships, and each relationship teaches us a little about ourselves, teaches us about our attachment style teaches us about our relationships with our parents. I can count at least 2 in my head like that, of working through mommy daddy issues with that relationship. Yeah. And it's important work that we are meant to do in this life, not to marry the first person that comes along, because we have to go through those things and self-realize and self-actualize who we really want to be. And so it takes time to get there and be with the right partner for you.
How did
long term or forever?
Yeah, it is. It is important, that journey. It is the most important journey that anyone can initiate, because the programming that we receive is that we tend to everyone else first, and we do not pay attention to the self. And that is a recipe for burnout. That doesn't work. And so because it doesn't work, you'll see families divorcing. You'll see all kinds of stuff that goes on within the family, abuse and all of these things. Because those that go on this journey and recognize the fact of how precious they are, how unique they are, they will start to initiate boundaries. And when people don't have boundaries, then a lot of those type things are what manifest as a result of not having the boundaries. But when you go on this personal growth and this walk, it is years, and it will be continual years until you die, because you are so rich and so deep that you're constantly learning more about yourself. And when situations come, I love sometimes when a situation comes, because it gives me an opportunity to see another aspect of myself. I tell people the creators are only visible when there's darkness. You don't need the creator when you're partying and having a good time. Actually, he's just watching you, waiting to have this conversation about you. But the creator comes on board or is ignited when the darkness is there. And so I tell people, don't panic about the darkness. Sit down, breathe, learn to quiet the self, the mind, and breathe and continue with that breath. That breath is the bridge between the natural and the supernatural. Allow that space to come in, and you will see what happens within the inside. As you and your husband now embarking on the meditation and learning all these things, the kids are coming all over the place. Yeah, I love this. You have I have 5 boys, by the way. Don't worry about it. So you're not even there yet. And so the kids are coming, and all of these things. You're learning about yourself. You're on your journey. How did you now, from where the children are, you mentioned your husband, he is also on his journey with that information. How did you now begin to reconnect deeper into the spiritual realm? Because you had this recipe, this dish laying inside your spirit from since you were 8 years old, that manifested now that you give birth. And I know those tugs that comes from that baby being, that spiritual baby, that hold the space. How you say that? You said it on the onset. Your first thing that you created. This. Talk to me about being pregnant with this spiritual baby in there, and how your life was, and that dealing with the natural mother and wife and situation, and the spiritual thing inside.
So you mean the birth of the book, or do you mean
even the journey, the development of it? Yeah, the development of it that gives birth to the book, because the book is just an end product of something that took place. Talk to me about the cooking of the book. As I say, that dish being cooked, situations coming up, and all of those things.
Yeah. So I did the Reiki training with my Reiki Master. That had some interesting little tidbits along the way, including, so I had seen ghosts from time to time through the years, and I never could hear what I could never understand what they wanted. In my head, I would ask, why are you here? What do you want? And it was like, the Charlie Brown teacher parents voice, or to me, it's more like Spy Kids with the little robot kids, and they can't talk yet because they don't have the brain, and they're just like, nya, nya, nya. So that's kind of what it sounded like. And then after my first Reiki attunement, the first contact I had with the ghost, I said, "What do you want?" And they answered, and it blew my mind.
Wow.
And I knew that this was definitely a path that I was on, that was the correct path. So, my Reiki master is really good about saying, when you're ready to practice on people, the clients will show up. When you're ready to be a teacher, the students will show up. And that absolutely happened along the way. And I have always been the, like the good student throughout my years. So her big thing, and I believe that an important part of the Reiki practice is self-practice, self-care, which is self-care is important for us to always do, because if you forget about you, your cup is empty. So I practice on myself almost daily, and that is where I get a lot of messages. It's a form of meditation when you're working on yourself, that you're still and quiet and just open to receiving. And so it has been an incredible part of the experience. But then when I started practicing on clients, particularly clients that had trauma, they would come pretty often, but still they were like, "What can I do in between sessions?" And so I started writing down affirmations from them. Sometimes the affirmations were channeled during the session and I would just transcribe, and sometimes I would just create, like, "Let me go meditate on it and I will write you something." And some of them were like, "Oh, well, this is universal. This is not really just for this one person." Or I would edit them to become universal, with just a few, line changes. And I always thought I would make an affirmation deck out of them. And so when the shutdown happened, when the pandemic happened, I knew it was time to write the book. I was hearing from my guides over and over again, whether it was my own work on myself or every time someone else worked on me, they're like, "Your guides want you to write." And I'm like, I know. But I couldn't get myself to do it. And then the shutdown happened and I was like, "Okay, I know, it's time." And what I thought was going to be a deck ended up turning into a lot of writing and the affirmations, and then writing a little thing introducing the affirmation, or a little something that might help you experience healing before you work on the affirmation. And so it became a book very quickly. And, there were points that I thought I was finished, and then I would go look over it and I was like, "Oh, I didn't write mommy issues or daddy issues," and then would meditate on that and write something for that. And it without tooting my own horn, from what the feedback I've gotten from the book so far, is that it's really powerful. Multiple people have told me they keep it on their nightstand and they just flip open to whatever page comes before bed and they do that affirmation. There are even people in my family who were very moved by it, who, are not emotionally engaged, but they really got a lot out of it. So it definitely was timely. And that was the whole point of it, that everybody was traumatized by the shutdown. There's nobody that was immune from that. It was all around the world. So, the book felt like it had to be out as soon as possible and be a gift to everyone who was suffering.
I believe we called the pandemic. I believe there was a lot of, and I say this to people.
Yes, I do too, in a way.
Yeah, I think they think I'm strange in that way, but hey, I am what I am. I believe that it was a gift that was given to us. I believe we called it, and the reason why it showed up, there were millions of people that were pregnant. They were pregnant with books. They were pregnant with businesses. They were pregnant with all types of stuff that needed to give birth. And we as a collective, with our madness, we were hooked into the system, and we could not come out, could not unhook. And because we could not unhook, people were pressed. They were calling these things. They were pulling it, and this thing manifested. Boom, shut down everything. And I cannot tell you I've interviewed over 100 people, and I would say about 80% of them gave birth to their babies within the pandemic. We called it. It was time, but because we did not know how to unhook as a collective, we were given the gift, and it was utilized by people that were calling it into existence to give birth to the things that were necessary in order to move us through. I believe that in that agreement, certain people were at their time to move on from this plane. And so I know it's painful in many ways, but I believe it was necessary to give birth to things that are going to usher the world to its next phase. And so you were given the opportunity to present and to release your child. That's called Hold the Space. And I want you to do me a favor, Michelle. Go back, because you've gotten some information. And on the onset, we had talked about your first visitation, which I think comes to us, the opportunity for us to get a chance to see who we are. And I call that enlightenment. And enlightenment for me means that you and I have such a beautiful opportunity to become students of ourselves. And as we study ourselves, as you said, we develop, and I mentioned to you, we develop these new policies and procedures. And you have them in your book called Hold Space, those policies and procedures that people were egging on at you, and you were writing down, going in your meditation and getting the information and putting it down. And they became policies and procedures that can guide other people. Talk to me about some of those people, because we go to the next phase, which is, I think, the greatest of the gifts. And that is to become servants. And when we are living, we don't come and visit this place. We live from this place. And so our lifestyle now becomes one of servants. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing, because there's joy there. There's all kinds of stuff that is there. Talk to me about some of those people, Michelle. Pull one or two out of your memory that when you began to talk to them and encourage them and make them aware of who they are, using those tools of the affirmations and stuff like that, and the Reiki and all of these things. Talk to me about one of those, because I know it is such a beautiful space when that happens, and it is powerful, man. There's no drug like it to see the awakening of a spirit being as they get it, as they say, when they get it, and that spirit man, that individual lights up, Michelle, and that smile comes on their face. Sometimes they're crying and wailing deeply. Yeah. But that transition took place. Talk to me about some of it.
So I always say that, and the practice of Reiki is, we are channels of the energy. We are holding space for that healing. I'm not the healer. I am, assisting it, but not the actual healer. But to bear witness to people shifting for trauma that they've been holding for sometimes decades, and have been in therapy for sometimes decades, and they come into the Reiki space really weak, like their spirit is so small and like a scared child. And then to see them blossom into a strong adult with passion and poise and confidence. It's an amazing transformation to see, and that they commit. That's the thing.
Yes, that's the thing.
Not everybody commits. Sometimes when people hit a really powerful place in their therapy or Reiki or whatever healing modality they're using, they're like, okay, I'm good. And then they walk away.
Yeah.
And they're not really finished.
Yeah.
Some of them do come back, but some of them don't. I always wonder, are they okay? But the ones that stick around and push through, it's a beautiful transformation to see, like seed turn into plant, turn into flower, turn into more plants and flowers and just see them as this gorgeous, flower garden, that they can be. And then if I'm lucky to see them long enough, I see them start doing their own planting and helping others. And that's
beautiful
service that once we get there, we give back.
Yeah.
That is a practice that we were meant to do. And we did in other, ancient civilizations, or Native Americans did it and tried to teach, us colonizers how to do it. And we took bits that we liked and we're like, we don't want that. We don't want the service to others. We just want to make money. We want your land. We want to make money on it. And that's it. But no, that was the whole thing, that the sharing, the caring for each other, that is what we're being pushed back to. And that is why I think COVID happened, to make us sit back, be in the dark, be a little afraid, and find that beautiful self that we are, the beautiful part of our soul that cares about humanity. And many of us did find it. And a lot of people found me out of nowhere in 2020 till now, and were on the brink of awakening and literally coming to me and saying, I think I'm crazy. And I'm coming to you because I don't even know why, but I think you can tell me one way or another if I am or I'm not. And to be able to tell somebody that they're a light worker or a starseed and you're remembering your past lives and you're not crazy. It feels like we lost each other, but I'm going to keep talking. So I really celebrate the process of people finding our path forward, and the people along the way that are going to help us climb the hills and the mountains and the rocky parts of our path to get to where we really are meant to go. The people that, all of my clients mean a lot to me, but the people that I've met over the pandemic, even though I have, some of them I have never met in person, they were so illuminating to me, even, that I just, seeing them embrace their awakening, embrace their power, to not only embrace it, but then start integrating it and growing. And then the same thing, turning it back out and being in service to others. It is an absolutely wonderful thing.
We call it a pandemic where we couldn't touch each other. It attacked where we the most fundamental human need, where contact with each other, where we were forced to be by ourselves. It was brilliant. I know people probably think I'm nuts, Michelle, but I thought it was just a brilliant thing because it forced us to separate, unhooked from work, from family, from friends, and isolated us to a place where people had to dig, and a lot of people were looking at the stuff going, I don't like this. And I might be a little crazy. And then they start seeking you out. And so I believe it came to usher growth and to cause people to move forward. And I think we are at the space in time where we have to become adults versus children. And what you have a chance to witness within the Reiki session is that transition from childhood to becoming an adult, because most of them, 90% of them, when they are there, it is from a childhood trauma that has caused them to act and behave and live a certain way. And then through the Reiki, the channeling of the energy and all of those other type mobilities that are out there that are used to create that space, it ushers that person from the child to an adult. And when they get there, it's amazing to see they change, they walk different, they speak different, they behave different. Paul said a statement, he says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. And when I was an adult, I behave and spoke as an adult. And so it was my pleasure, Michelle. This conversation has been beautiful. And those that have been listening to us, I am telling you, go and buy that book, because she has put together some policies and procedures that will be able to guide you and usher you into the space that you need to be in, because her title is that book, she's holding that space for you so that you can come in, grab, feed, get satisfied, get the revelation, grab your policies and procedures that you need, and move through to your next phase in your life, so that we can hear you call, get in touch with us and tell us, I heard that podcast and you guys did, I did this. Now I'm a Reiki teacher. I'm a this, I'm that. And I'm sure Michelle is going to love it. But thank you so much, Michelle, for coming to us and sharing
Thank you,
your
Ken.
journey.
I greatly appreciate this time. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.